Hello and welcome to AI Curious. My name is Jeff Wilser. I'm a journalist, I'm a human, and I am curious about AI. And I'm also somehow, against all odds, the host of a podcast that is now celebrating its 1-year anniversary. Now, the goal was always to cover a wide range of AI, and in this year, if nothing else, we have done that. Our conversations have ranged from CEOs to artists, philosophers, neuroscientists, the designers of AI-powered drones that are used in warfare, the frontline reporters who are covering drones in warfare, productivity experts, AI skeptics, AI safety experts, medical doctors, futurists, writers, people who are trying to create AI clones, educators, self-driving car innovators, AI-focused lawyers, the inventors of robots, and on and on and on. But where did this start? 1 year ago, our very first conversation was with a pair of Hollywood producers. That would be, of course, John Attanasio and Luisa Huang, the co-founders of Toonstar Studios. Now, John and Luisa have long been pioneers in AI, years before it was cool. As we discussed in that first episode, years ago, they used AI to rapidly speed up the creation of animation, making it easier and cheaper and faster. This made it more inclusive. So if you're a creator with a great idea, you could turn that into animation at a fraction of the cost and perhaps 10x or 50x faster. Since we spoke 1 year ago, Toonstar has been very, very busy. They worked with a creator named Parker James to launch the animated series StEvEn and Parker, which now gets over 30 million weekly YouTube views. That's a smidge more than viewership here at AI Curious, and has been covered by the likes of Deadline, Forbes, and so on. Now, I am in no way objective. I've now spoken with John and Luisa many times over the years. I like them. I consider them friends. But in my unbiased opinion, I do think this is one of the cleanest, ripest examples of the optimistic use case of AI, of how it can expand the pie, of how it can help us do more with the same amount of resources, as opposed to doing the same and cutting resources. So I thought for our 1-year anniversary, it only felt right to do a quick check-in episode with John and Luisa for a few reasons. 1, for nostalgia and symmetry. 2, I wanted to hear more about this very cool use case for AI, what they're doing with StEvEn and Parker. And 3, and most important, I wanted a bit of a vibe check for AI in Hollywood to see how the perceptions have shifted in the past year, or perhaps not. And I think this part of the conversation gets at some of the real nuance with AI. As we get into during the chat, it's not as simple as AI is good or AI is bad. An industry can be conflicted, and even individual people can be conflicted. John and Luisa were also generous enough to open up about what it's been like for them personally to have a bit of a contrarian take on AI. There are some in the space who think that they are betraying the values of creators, even though in my mind, they're building new tools for creators. It's complicated stuff, and we get into it. So with that, please enjoy my conversation with John Attanasio and Luisa Huang, co-founders of Toonstar Studios. Luisa and John, welcome back to the pod for our 1-year anniversary.
Yeah.
Happy anniversary.
Yes. Happy anniversary.
So
What is
there's
it, like
no
paper,
one.
gold, silver?
Yeah, what's the AI version? What's a chatbot anniversary?
Right.
So there's no one I'd rather speak to to celebrate this mark than you guys. You helped kick off the podcast with a topic that I think is on so many people's mind, and a lot has happened in this space since then. So I'm really excited to chat with you about how you're seeing the space evolve from your neck of the woods in Hollywood. Obviously, a very tricky topic, and I want to dive into all that nuance. So let's get right into it. Start with you, Luisa. How would you say you've seen the AI in Hollywood space evolve over the past year?
I feel there's definitely a lot more. I feel like there's been a lot more folks in the industry who have gotten hands-on experience. Where I would say about a year ago, everyone was still like talking about these tools, but I feel like now most people have had a chance to play with some sort of AI systems, right? Whether it be visual, whether it be just as simple as through the ChatGPT interfaces. I feel like there's been to some degree, just like on at least at a even personal level. If they're not using it professionally, they're at least personally, they have used it, they've experienced it, and they have gotten a little bit more sort of exposure to what its capabilities are. And so I think that's been a really good thing.
And John, would you let's again, I know there's like 17 different ways we can slice and dice this, but let's start at a high level with overall like tone or vibes. John, would you say the overall approach, or whether positive or negative, how would you say that has shifted in the past year?
last year. Yeah. I think so going back, we start with last year, feel like, I think especially during the double strike. And I think as that was happening, there was few kind of reactions. One, what I would say is like this irrational exuberance, which generally would correlate to, I think, like Silicon Valley or like tech oriented folks.
Yeah.
And then so that was like one reaction. The other reaction, which I think we saw more of just because it's a proximity. We're in LA, we're in Hollywood, and that world is our background. And so I think we're pretty geographically here, was what I'd say is like this irrational fear. And there was, yeah. And I think unfortunately there was a fair amount, probably demonized and sort of framed it as a bit of a scapegoat for some of these like macro, and they're big. These are real challenges that I think that are facing the entertainment industry. And
Yeah.
and the reality is like the reason legacy in Hollywood is where it is today, that's not because of AI. That's
Same with media, I would say. Same exact dynamic with media, right? Websites, newspapers, magazines, like that.
Exactly.
That pie has been shrinking for a long time.
That's right. That's right.
AI might accelerate the shrinkage potentially, but it's not, I would argue, it's not the fundamental driver for why the pie is shrinking.
Yep. Completely agree. And so I think, and then that's where it was like almost a misattribution in a way where it's, oh, listen, we can these like woes of today on this new tech, which is not the case. In sort of Hollywood fashion, I think it was a pretty effective campaign, and it did scared a lot of people. And so I think I'd say most of last year that was the case. And then it feels that still exists. And there still is this fear. I still would put it in the irrational fear category that still absolutely exists in Hollywood. But it does feel like, I would say, over the course of this year, there's been more experimentation. It does feel like there's more openness to talking about it. And again, like that still exists, but it does feel like there are more people that have at least acknowledged, hey, this is a powerful technology. It's here. It's not going away. And everyone's better suited to look at this and figure out, okay, how can we use it to supercharge what we're doing, whether it's charge creativity, supercharge productivity, like audience building. There are just a lot of different applications for it in the entertainment world. And it feels like there are people that are more open to experimenting.
Luisa, when we say there's like kind of mix of this, is it more, just as an outsider, I'm wondering, is it like, to be very reductive, is it the writers and actors are primarily the ones who are most skittish and worried, and it's the more producers and like directors who are excited about using AI? Or is a split not that obvious? How would you characterize what the split is, and who are the main different kind of contingents, if you will, who have different thoughts about AI?
Yeah, I think that it's probably so. I think in the beginning, probably I would say that because it came at the same time as the writer's strike. The writer's strike was like the first, right away, I think. And also just like the immediate lowest hanging fruit. When you look at ChatGPT, that made the biggest splash, right? There's just no, there's no denying the fact that when it burst onto the scene and people got their hands on it, it had the fastest growth to like 100 million subscribers across like any technology. So everyone got their hands on it. And then all of a sudden it was this like big splashy headlines of, oh my gosh, this can do all of this stuff, right? It can do everything. You can understand, you can write, it could present. And couple that around the same time as the writer's strike, writers definitely were the first kind of ones that felt it like, oh, this is something that can write big chunks of paragraph in one prompt, right? Click of a button, and there you have an entire article. And then came the actor strike, and it was like, oh, wait a minute. You can scans of people that they can then drop them into these environments. And now maybe you don't need the background actors. Maybe eventually you're going to be able to have somebody completely replaced by AI. So I think those two are the kind of the first big categories. And then I think producers and directors, because their jobs are a little bit more nuanced and it's a little less almost like specialized, right? So when you have a very specialist sort of job,
oh, interesting.
It becomes really easy to be like, okay, I get it. I know exactly what the one thing it is that you do, right? And then you can very easily map the technology to the specialization. When you think about what's a producer's job, and very jokingly, like, everything and anything, like the bathroom was broken down, go fix that. You gotta book talent and negotiate contracts, like everything, right? So it becomes a little harder to be like, okay, you could see an area where AI is going to be able to help a producer's job, but they're not going to be able to completely replace because it's more than just this one singular thing. So I think wherever you have like very specific roles and very specific and narrowly focused like tasks, it becomes a little easier or it becomes a little bit more tenuous because you're like, oh, wait a minute, like if this could do 90% of the thing that I do, then what's left for me to do? So that's like that immediate like gut reaction. And I think it becomes especially so that it is a mix, right? Both can be true. You can be both excited by, but then also frightened by it. Because once you get your hands on the technology, you can't help but to marvel at the technology. Be like, oh my God, wow. But then at the same time, after the, oh my God, wow, you're like, oh my God, wow. So it's this both like reaction of what the technology can do and the implications.
That's a really interesting framework. I don't think I've considered quite that clearly before. The idea that the more narrow your job is, the more that could be vulnerable to AI, and the more multifaceted it is, if you will, the less likely AI is, at the moment at least, to be able to replace that. Maybe that's a chat GPT like 7 type thing. I'll give that some more thought and wonder how that applies to different industries and jobs as well. John, it seems like on the surface, the very things people are excited about, like people maybe more the producers and directors, that could be diametrically opposed to the interests of the folks who are worried about it, as in writers and actors. If there's, again, on the surface, the idea that these are almost two opposing forces. I can slash cost by X by using AI, which means there's a polite way of saying we need fewer actors or fewer writers. That's on the surface. But I think your guys' approach is really exciting because it's offering a third way, or a way to maybe enlarge the pie as opposed to shrink the pie. How are you seeing that framework? And can you elaborate a bit on why you view it, if I understand you correctly, not that simplistic, not that like reductive of you have these two opposing forces here?
Yeah. I think that in the way we view it is, and we talk about this example, because so we take our studio, we're about a 25 person studio. And the way we're able to use the tech is very much from I'll say this word a lot, but like supercharged standpoint. So it will basically help us from, and when I say supercharged, so it can have, that has to do with supercharged for production, which means we can produce at a speed that you can't produce without the technology. And what that speed does is it allows us to basically make more content. So we can bring our projects to life and fruition faster because, and like I know we've talked about this in the past, but when you look at animation, historically, animation takes a very long time to do and it generally is very expensive. And what happens is those are significant barriers to entry for people that, and there are just more and more creators out there. There are more and more storytellers, younger generations. There was just, I think, a study about YouTube and it says basically, I think it says like 65% of Gen Z considers like they identify as a creator in some way. And so what we've seen with generations, especially younger generations, they're just more creators and they're more storytellers. And the problem is they can't get stuff made in animation historically, because if you look at the sort of that set of creators, if they were to go to a legacy studio, there's absolutely no way that they're going to get something made. And again, this kind of goes back to where the industry is today, and some of the drivers of that, again, which don't have anything to do with AI itself, but that's a reality. And so what happens is, a good example of this is we have a series called StEvEn and Parker. And StEvEn and Parker is a series we did we co-produced with, his name's Parker James. Parker James lives in a suburb outside of Dallas, Texas. And he was doing live action stuff on TikTok that he was building a really healthy audience. And he had this great idea for this animated character world. And we connected with him and we worked with him to basically turn these characters, bring them to life in animation. We tested it on his TikTok and it performed really well. And then we're like, okay, this is great. Let's move to YouTube. And in the space of about a year, it went from 0 to he now gets 30 million weekly viewers. And when you put that in context, that's actually 10x what The Simpsons gets. And like we're big fans of The Simpsons.
No shots fired, right?
No shots fired. Like we love that series. It's amazing. But now all of a sudden, and I'll call him a kid because he's much younger than I am, but this kid he's from a suburb of Dallas, Texas, now has an animated series that's getting that kind of viewership. And that's that's totally incremental, because what we would say is like, without this technology and without approaching production the way we approach it, and without approaching distribution and audience building the way we approach it, StEvEn and Parker would never exist. And so that's where we say this is completely added. I think the kind of conversations, we're just in a different position, because we're not in a position where we're talking about redundancies or elimination. We're in a position where we're saying, hey, this is supercharging us, and we can go 10, 20, 30, 50x what you could normally do with a studio our size, which then at the end of the day, that opens up all these opportunities. So it basically opens up the opportunity to get more series made, more projects made, get them done more quickly, which to us, that's net positive. It's completely incremental.
Absolutely. I had a recent guest on the pod, Nathaniel Whitmore, and his point, his overarching thesis on AI is that, by analogy, if coding takes only 10% of a time it used to, it doesn't mean we're going to only have 10% as many coders. It means we can do coding 10 times faster, have 10 times more code, and apply that to everything. And this is a perfect example that you're giving here. And there are going to be a lot more Parker James out there in the world. This kid who's in Dallas, who now at his fingertips has access to this incredible creation tool that's now reaching 30 million people a week. There are a lot of Parker James out there. And do you think it might be that, another analogy here, maybe this is the analogy for AI writ large, right? No one really knows how it's going to truly impact the world. It's going to have positive impacts and additive impacts, like in your case, and it might also have some pinching impacts for others. Maybe there are people who are maybe there is someone who would have gotten paid for 4 hours of extra background acting work. And now some AI does it instead. So do you think that maybe there is there will be a shift and over time? And it's hard to say how it exactly will play out, but real talk, it probably will hurt like real human beings, real actors or writers or graphic designers and whatnot. Like that might happen. And there will also be other folks who are able to monetize their creations and art in ways they could not before. And that maybe net the pie will get bigger and more folks, and there will be a rising tide. I'm mixing a lot of metaphors here, but that there will also be folks impacted by it in a negative way and in a positive way. And happily, you guys are on the fun side, the positive side of this. Am I framing that right?
Yeah. Yeah. And I think, the shifts, right? The shifts in the analogies that you brought up, that's absolutely true. And market forces, like those shifts are perpetually happening, right? Like those shifts are driven by some by technology, some by even competition outside of the US, right? Globalization, also like moves those shifts. So I would say that those kinds of shifts of, okay, there's this impact into the ecosystem that goes beyond just AI is not the only factor. Technology is not the only factor, right? Like the broader sort of economic business landscapes, like that's perpetually happening and it's happening all the time. Maybe not. I think what we really feel is because it's such like a big sort of technological leap that you're seeing this acceleration. And so it's like somebody hit the fast forward button and you're seeing it so quickly that it's jarring. I would say I love analogies, and I especially love analogies about food because I spend most of my time thinking about that. Actually,
love it. Bring it.
Outside of, I think that if you think about food, there was like a rise and an explosion for a while of food trucks as a category because people were like, oh my God, I could start like a little food business and get something out there without having to rent an actual brick and mortar place. It just, what does it do? It brings down that cost of entry to be able to be like, oh gosh, like I have this idea, I have this small business, I have this tiny thing. And that doesn't mean that people are no longer walking into a restaurant. Nobody says, oh gee, look at all the food trucks that are out there. We've got to start shutting down restaurants, right? The Cheesesteak Factory is not going out of business because there's a Kogi truck, that exists. So I think and also if you look at, that's exactly what happened to a lot of the food trucks that became really successful and well-known. They actually started laddering up. And what happened to Kogi as a business, right? It moved beyond the food trucks. It had 1, 2, 10 food trucks, and then it started having brick and mortar. The guy had his own show. It expanded. And then the ecosystem expanded along with it. And I think that's a thing that we also see with this idea of we can empower more creators to be able to jump into the category. And then as they find success, they're going to grow and they're going to ladder up and they're going to expand. And that's also going to create more opportunities for people to be also part of their umbrella. That's the push. And that's what's going to grow the pie, is that the success of these individual creators are going to spawn these really more like indie umbrellas that's going to then in aggregate become some like a more powerful force.
And I love that. I love all of that. And as you just outlined beautifully, like your guys' mission at its core is to empower creators. And it has been since the earliest days. And obviously we've spoken many times over the last few years, since the earliest incarnation of your studio. That's what you've been all about. And you're wildly creator friendly, creative, positive. My guess is you have a lot of personal friends in the space that are creators, writers, directors, actors. Can I ask, what has it been like for you personally to have this pretty progressive and nuanced take about AI, about how you are embracing AI to help creators? in a landscape, an environment where, as John, you pointed out earlier, a lot of irrational fear, right? And maybe, frankly, in fairness, probably some rational fear, probably a mix of rational fear and
Yeah.
irrational fear, right?
Yeah.
Have you guys felt like, has it been challenging to go publicly with, hey guys, AI can be cool for reasons XYZ? Has that kind of flying in the face of the kind of quote unquote orthodoxy, or like the quote beliefs to have in Hollywood, are almost a bit of tribalism in that space? What has that been like to have what I think feels like a contrarian and even minority view
Yeah.
at a very reductive level?
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, that's a great question. It can make, I won't say any names, but it can make for interesting. So one of my neighbors is pretty well known person in the industry who has also been on occasion pretty vocal sort of about, the, and sharing, some of the downside or potential perils of it. And so it makes for interesting, interactions on the street corner. But I think I
I'm
mean,
visualizing Trump and Biden, or Trump and Harris signs at opposite lawns.
Right,
Not to say
exactly.
either one of you is wearing a red hat, but
exactly. No, especially when I'm walking the dog but yeah, I think it's a great question. And one, I would say I appreciate, the question, because I think it does acknowledge that, listen, at the core of it, it's not easy. None of this is like when you're doing something that is new and is going to have, meaningful and profound impact. It's not easy. So I appreciate the question, because there definitely has been part of it has been, folks that we know that are look at us in a way where it's like, geez, what are you doing? Because this could be damaging for the industry. And I think what is needed, and we'll always talk about this, is really like, we're big advocates of education. And no matter what side you sit on, the most dangerous thing to us is ignorance and being uninformed. And so for us, it's how do we help educate people about the technology, about real use cases? And to your point, there are scenarios where it's going to be like this human nature. You can look at social media and you can say social media has had a significant impact on society. And some, you can argue good use cases. Some have been clearly bad use cases. And so I think the same can be said of this technology, and you're going to have bad actors. And this is where it really is about, okay, like real education. What is the tech? What does it really mean today? And yes, we can like project and look in the future to a day where it's like, oh my God, I hit a button and out pops The Simpsons, or I hit a button and out pops Family Guy or South Park. We don't think that's the case. We actually don't necessarily believe that's ever going to be the case, because our approach to this has always been like, we have a very like creator centric and human centric approach to the technology. And we'll always say it's both, right? Like where the magic happens is the tech plus creatives, the tech plus human beings. And those together is where, yes, you can create things like StEvEn and Parker. For us, it's not one or the other. And I think it's just a matter of having rational conversations about what it actually is, and talking through. And I think like what also has been surprising, I'd say, which is, I think this is positive, is that as we talk to our colleagues and friends in the industry, the more we have these conversations and the more they see, hey, here's how we're using, here are the benefits. We're actually, it's been good. I'm surprised that we've seen a lot of people come on and they're like, yeah, they're more interested. They're interested in doing projects with us. They want to test things out. But it requires like a conversation and just talking about it. But I will say our sort of like peer group has been really open to the idea of, okay, what can we do? How can we get our feet wet? Yeah. So
Luisa, how about you, as far as what it's been like to be a bit of a contrarian voice in this very complicated topic?
Yeah. I would agree with everything that John's. I think that once people have had a chance to, once you have a conversation, it's almost, I could see and feel a shift, because I think if you scale it, pare it back, like, why does anybody get into this industry? Because they want to tell stories. They want to they want to put something out into the world. They want to create something for an audience. That's really the driving force, is you want to actually see the output of your creativity in the physical manifestation. And so I think the thing that they didn't get into this industry for, and again, this has nothing to do with AI, and that is actually, no one got into this business to be like, yes, I want to pitch 300 projects and then get something optioned and then sit and wait some more and wait some more, right? No one got into this industry for that part. And so the idea that if you lower the cost so much so that you can just really focus more on I'm going to do stuff, right? That then becomes, it's all of a sudden the shift of, wait a minute, you mean I don't have to sit and wait for X, Y, or Z to tell me that I can make a pilot because it's not going to cost $1 million to do it? Oh, okay. Because I think there's a false sort of like narrative of like that the sit and wait is only to sit and wait and green light a movie like in totality.
Right.
No, you're sitting and waiting for every single tiny incremental step, right? You're sitting and waiting to be like, yes, here's a pitch that I have. Okay, now you can write the first pilot, right? The first 30 pages. Okay, then we're going to read it, and then we're going to sit and wait some more for you to be able to like, okay, do like a concept layout. So you're waiting.
Every
for all
writer
these,
that I know would be nodding vigorously at just the script of the process. Totally. It's horrible.
It's excruciating.
And it's emotionally taxing. It's playing with your playing with your emotions and the hopes and dreams and fear and all that stuff. Every day you're waiting like, oh my God, am I not good enough? Am I a good enough writer? Am I a good enough person? Am I a failure?
Right.
So I love the idea of framing AI as a way to help get rid of that awful, or not get rid of, but certainly improve it ideally. Yeah.
That's right. And so that's really the stuff that guys, if we took away, you're never going to be able to take it away completely, but if you took away 50% of this, like how much could your life be improved by taking away 50% of the anxiety inducing level of sitting and waiting and like getting notes and like seeing it? Like, it's just, that's just that you're like, yes, AI could speed that along, remove some of this stuff. Now it's, yes, my life could be really, there's a lot of good benefits to this thing.
Luisa,
Because I would love to
that is the most compelling, that's the most compelling pitch for AI I think I've ever heard. And that is a lovely note to end on. Thank you again to John, Attanasio, and Luisa Huang, co-founders of Toonstar Studios. You can find links to their hit series, StEvEn and Parker, in the show notes, as I'm sure their 30 million YouTube views will get a massive bump from AI Curious. And thank you to you, dear listener. If this is your first time to the ride, please consider subscribing at Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or now YouTube. And we will soon, I promise, I know you're waiting, we will soon be launching new AI Curious content with a brand new format in the coming weeks. If I could ask for one anniversary gift, as cup in hand, as shameless and degrading as it sounds, if you would rate it 5 stars in the platform of choice, that would be amazing. Maybe even write a quick 7-word review. That would be delightful. Thank you again. Happy anniversary, and see you next time. Take care.